don't get me started on Liz with her pointless moaning and whinging. I really didn't like her. Hi and welcome to my channel. My name is Sarah and I love to talk about books. And if you've joined me before, you might notice that I have finally sorted out my lockdown hair and I am feeling great. Because not only am I looking a little bit more put together, my hairdresser is one of my best friends, so it meant that I got to spend some time with her, and that always puts me in a great mood. So today it's time for my July reading wrap up, and I know that for June I split my wrap up in between my reads that I've done for reading challenges and then my new releases reads, and I was going to do that again this month, but actually I've only got 2 new releases that I managed to get through, which is a lot different from the amount that was actually on my TBR, so I'm not going to split it. And also just I'm too busy to edit and upload and everything, 2 different videos, because as I'm filming this it's Thursday, so we are 6 days into Simon Savage's book Hibernation, which I'm sucking at. I've only finished 1 book so far and I had told myself I was going to get through 6, so we'll see how I get done with that. But at 1 o'clock on Saturday morning, Dewey's 24-hour reverse readathon kicks off, and so I'm hoping that that will give me the opportunity to catch up on the reading that I really haven't done this week. I might film a vlog for that. The only other vlog I've ever done was for the April Dewey's readathon, and you know, it was fun. But I think for me to film a vlog, it has to be for an occasion, an event, because, you know, I'm not a very interesting reader most of the time. So I'm hoping to film a vlog for that, and I'm also hoping to go for the full 24 hours. And I don't know how either of those is going to pan out, but that will be next week's video. So I'm just going to keep all my wrap-up stuff to today, and I have got, I think it's 3 5-star reads, 2 4-star reads, a 3-star and a 2-star. And I know previously I've started with my lowest rated read and worked my way up, but I think today I'm going to start off with my 5 stars, because they, out of all the books, obviously deserve the most attention from anyone who's watching, and so I'm going to crack on with those. The first 5-star was one of my new releases, and it was The Sea Wife by Amity Gaige. I've wanted to read this book for ages. I heard it being discussed on the All the Books podcast probably back in December, and now finally got my hands on a copy and I've read it, and it didn't disappoint. So this is the story of Juliet and Michael after Juliet has kind of reluctantly agreed to Michael's plan of taking a year out, buying a boat and living at sea, basically, along with their 2 small children. We know going into it that a tragedy has occurred, and the story is told through Juliet's narration, both during the trip and in its aftermath, and also through Michael's captain's log, which starts off as very much a captain's log but develops more into a journal, so we really get his insight into their experiences. Juliet struggles with depression. She's at a place in life where she's kind of feeling a bit like a failure, and their marriage is kind of on rough water before they even set sail, and this book really takes a deep dive into both those things. I promise these puns are not intentional. This book really takes a deep dive into those aspects, as well as the story of their actual trip. Much like many marriages, their trip starts off as a dream, you know, that's filled with hope for a life-changing future, and it quickly becomes quite an effort and then an actual total nightmare. And we get to live through this sharp drop through some really, really incredible writing. Amity Gaige is a really talented writer. I have sailed once before, but it was a very long time ago, and I've forgotten pretty much everything that I learned from doing it. And actually not having that knowledge really helps in reading this book, because you feel the complexities and the fear that Juliet as a novice feels herself. In particular, there's a scene where there is a storm and I was absolutely gripped, and my whole body was racked with tension reading it. And also in the situation Juliet finds herself in, which leads to the tragedy, was really powerful as well. This book deals with a lot of themes. It's really, really compelling. It's got that great adventure aspect of life on a boat, but it also looks at things like the difficulties in relationships, grief, and I found it a very emotional read. I'm so glad I finally got my hands on this because it's definitely one of the best books I've read this year. My next 5-star read was The Shell Collector by Anthony Doerr. This was the book that was this month's pick from the Shelterbox Book Club, and I don't necessarily know if I'd have picked it up myself. I have read All the Light We Cannot See, which I absolutely loved, and I do read a couple of short story collections every year, so I'm glad this one came through my letterbox. I find that short story collections can often be a mixed bag, but sometimes you do find those ones where, you know, pretty much every story in them is really strong, and this is one of those books. Doerr's prose it's really beautiful, but not in a way that means it, you know, gets in the way of the meaning. I think he's got a really good talent for setting a scene and bringing it to life, and considering that these are short stories, most of the characters felt really well fleshed out as well. All of them were fully realised enough to drive a story forward, and I think that's because he gets really down to the emotions of a story, of a character, rather than getting bogged down in things like describing appearance or dialogue. Nature plays a really strong part in, I think, pretty much every story in this collection, particularly fishing, which is not something I ever thought would speak to me, but I do really love stories where people are really connecting with their environment. There's a lot of sadness in these stories, particularly around kind of thwarted relationships, ones that don't really meet their potential because of things outside of either party's control or because of the actions of one or both of the people in that relationship. And I think my favourite stories in the collection were also the saddest. I don't know what that says about me, but the emotion in them was so tangible, and just overall this is a beautiful collection. And my third 5-star read was Margaret Atwood's Cat's Eye, and this is in an omnibus collection with wilderness tips, which I haven't read yet but I will intend to get to. And Cat's Eye is the story of Elaine, who is a respected artist and returns to Toronto where she grew up for a retrospective of her work. But being there throws up a lot of memories of her childhood, particularly of friendships she had, where the girls were her best friends but also her biggest tormentors. And this is a book that really looks at how bullying can be something that you take with you into your adult life and how it can shape you as a person. I think I've read around, 10 of Margaret Atwood's books, and this is definitely up there with my favourites like The Handmaid's Tale, The Blind Assassin and Alias Grace. And this book spoke to me on a really deep level. I experienced bullying myself as a young teen, and although I'm not an artist like Elaine, I really liked the exploration of how that had shaped her work, because for me it worked as a bit of a metaphor of how bullying can haunt you and is something that you carry on into your adult life. You carry those injuries with you and you internalize them, and they affect how you see yourself and your place in the world. But this book isn't all doom and gloom. I really liked some of the childhood memories of Elaine's quirky family. I liked the development of her as an artist, and I also quite like the musings on reaching your midlife. Atwood's prose is really sharp. It's got her kind of signature dry wit, but it's also really meditative in this book. So although this is part of an omnibus edition, I loved it so much that I'm definitely going to try and track down a standalone copy for it to take pride of place on my shelves. My first 4-star read was Zed, a novel of Zelda Fitzgerald by Therese and Fowler. And so I think I kind of qualified this a bit in my TBR video in that, I've read a bit of F. Scott Fitzgerald's works. I haven't read any of Zelda's, but I am really fascinated by her. I read The Gatsby Affair, which is a non-fiction look at their relationship by Kendall Taylor, about a year, 18 months ago. And so I do have a bit of knowledge about the kind of phenomenon that was the Fitzgeralds. I think this book, because it's fictional, you can't really take everything it says at face value, but it does add, a little bit of colour and flavour to what I know now about the Fitzgeralds. I thought it was really enjoyable. It's really well paced, and even if you don't know anything about the Fitzgeralds, you can read this book and still get a lot from it, and it'll maybe encourage you to go and find out more about them, because let's face it, they were fascinating. They were kind of figureheads of that whole jazz age era. Zelda's often referred to as the first flapper, and their relationship itself is really interesting. It's like a case study of a beautiful love story, but also a bitter power struggle between two creative but ultimately quite damaged people, because they're both such contradictions. Zelda was a free spirit, but she also kind of craved validation through her art. And then Fitzgerald styled himself as being ultra modern, but he also had very conservative views when it came to marriage and what he expected from Zelda in her role as wife. And they both paid high prices for their lifestyles. Scott was a heavy drinker, which I think ultimately led to his relatively early death, and Zelda herself was subjected to the mental health treatment of the times and ended up dying in a fire whilst institutionalized. And this book focuses on the time of Zelda's life when she met Scott and throughout their marriage, as she struggles to find herself in the marriage when her hopes and dreams of what being a famous writer's wife would be are quickly shattered by the reality. I thought it was a bit of a shame that Zelda's mental health struggles later in the marriage and afterwards weren't really a key part of this book, because she was done a great disservice by the medical opinion of the day. But I can also kind of see the value in not focusing solely on that, because obviously, like anyone, Zelda was more than her mental illness. But what I really did appreciate in this is it's really Zelda's side of the toxic mess that their marriage became. Much like the Kendall Taylor book, I really did feel that Scott came off as the victim of the piece. It's hard to tell with this one because obviously it's a fictionalized account, but when you've got a non-fiction one that gels quite well with this, I do tend to think that was the case. I think where the fictionalized aspect of this really showed was in Zelda's voice. I didn't feel it was very true to her. It didn't come off as, like this feisty, passionate woman that I believe her to be. She came across as a bit washed out, almost like she got lost in the narrative of their marriage, which I suppose that is kind of true to life. But for me, it felt a bit lacking. But I still think this is a pretty good book. I mean, with the subject matter that she had, it would have been really hard to fail to tell a good story. But I guess on the flip side of that, given that these are real and prominent characters, it could be easy to fail to make it feel realistic. And I think that this book does walk that tightrope quite well, with a few wobbles, but overall I thought this was a really enjoyable read. And my next 4-star was The Woman Upstairs by Claire Messud. I went into this a little bit nervous because the title gave off some kind of girl on the train, woman in the window sort of vibes. This book is totally different and so much better than that. So it's the story of Nora, who is in her early 40s. She's I was going to say primary school, but it's set in I think America. Or is it Canada? I think it's America. Sorry. She's an elementary school teacher, kind of with a thwarted dream of being an artist. She's a dutiful daughter, she's a good citizen, and she's kind of become the woman upstairs, which was not a term I'd heard before. I don't know if this has just been coined for the book, but it's the faithful friend, the helpful neighbour, the one who keeps herself to herself. But underneath all that is a woman seething with anger at the way that life has played out for her and feeling that it's too late. It's too late to realise her dream of being an artist. It's too late to find love, have children. It's too late to stop that passage of time. Nora meets a family, a new pupil to her school and his Italian mother and Lebanese father, who are over from Paris for a residency for the father, whose name I've totally forgotten. He's an academic and they've come over for a year for him to work at the university. Nora strikes up a friendship with Serena, who's the mother, and she's also an artist, and through that friendship she also grows closer to the father and the son. And suddenly Nora's life is filled with hope and happiness, art and love, but this all comes crashing down when the friendship is betrayed by Serena. This book is amusing on a certain point in a woman's life, one which I'm not that far off from. And it looks at the regrets and the losses and that feeling of just having to get on with it that can come with that part. And I gained a lot from that, mainly positive actually, because I'm not as stuck as Nora is. I know a lot of people have classed Nora as an unlikable character. I didn't really feel that, but I think possibly why she's viewed that way is that anger and how she chooses not to channel it into anything positive but into these tirades and thoughts which can kind of make her come across a bit bitter. But I think the writing in this book is so close to perfection that actually that was what I enjoyed about Nora, because sometimes she was voicing these like untethered feelings that I've had and putting them into words when I haven't been able to. What I didn't like about Nora was her own capacity for betrayal and her sort of inability to acknowledge it or feel remorse for it. And for me, that was what made the ending all the more shocking and a little bit satisfying as well. I wish I was a fly on the wall for what happens after this book, because it's really the best ending I've read in a while. I really enjoyed this book. My 3-star read was Borrowed Lights by Joolz Denby, which I picked up a little while ago after I read her book Billy Morgan years ago, which I really, really liked. And there are similarities. This book also looks at the painful aspects of life and it has a certain darkness to it, much like Billy Morgan, but it is a very different book. I think of the two, Billy Morgan is stronger, but that's not to say that this isn't a good book. It's set in a Cornish surfing town which relies heavily on tourism, and it's narrated by Astra, who is in her 20s. She's had to drop out of uni because her mother has MS and it's worsening. So she drops out to care for both her mother and her younger sister. She's feeling a bit unanchored and unsure of her place in the world, so is happy when her friend Connie from Bradford, where Astra's family originates, moves down to open a beachside cafe. Astra picks up some waitressing shifts alongside her caring responsibilities and, is fairly happy. She's just treading water with her boyfriend and denying the huge crush she has on local surfer hero Luke. But when Connie's sister Angel comes to stay for the summer, life is kind of thrown upside down. Angel is beautiful and people are drawn to her to the point of obsession, but she's also like a void. She lacks empathy for anyone around her and doesn't really examine how her actions impact on other people. She's kind of like a blank screen, so people project onto her what they want her to be. But this has catastrophic results for those under her spell. This book is a slow burn towards a short, sharp ending. And what I think Joolz Denby does really well is this creation of characters. We get to know Astra like nobody else, and also there's a lot of other really well developed characters, particularly Cookie, who I totally fell in love with. It's told in a really chatty, colloquial style, which for the most part I really enjoyed. At times it did feel a little bit contrived, but most of the time it really did just feel like Astra was talking directly to me. And it's that connection that makes the ending such a shock. I wouldn't necessarily say surprise, but it makes that build up worth it. And then we get to my 2-star read, which is Across the Water by Ingrid Alexandra. And this is the story of Liz and Adam, who the house is really isolated, with its nearest neighbours being across a creek, and Liz is left on her own for quite long periods of time while Adam commutes into Sydney to wrap up the business. She works in a domestic violence shelter back in England and is suffering PTSD after a recent tragedy involving one of the women from the shelter. To take her mind off things, she spends a lot of time spying on the neighbours across the creek. One is a young woman who we find out is called Dee. She has a young baby, and seems to have a fraught relationship with the couple who live next door. When Dee and her baby go missing, Liz is convinced that these neighbours have something to do with it and is determined to solve the mystery. That premise really hooked me in, and I was really looking forward to this book, but unfortunately I really don't think that it delivered. This book had the potential to be really good. I was fascinated with Dee's story. She's kind of a reluctant mother and her dark past is catching up on her. I was intrigued by the neighbours as well, and particularly the wife Erica, who really doesn't seem to like Dee but also drops everything to help her with the baby. But the writing really lets this book down. There are so many inconsistencies in the plot. There's some twists that really only happen because of that infuriating thing where the characters just, you know, forget or don't mention something that is actually quite important. And there were just too many red herrings as well. It just felt a bit obvious. And don't get me started on Liz with her pointless moaning and whinging. I really didn't like her, and considering that the book is told from the point of view of all three women, they all sounded the same, so my feelings towards Liz bled into my feelings towards the other women as well, and just basically the book in general. I mean, this book is a quick read, and if you like mysteries it might be for you, because I mean, I didn't guess the outcome, but it wasn't for me. So that was my July. I didn't make as much progress with my new releases as I had hoped to. I'm hoping to maybe try and catch that up this month, but we'll see. But apart from that last one, quite a strong month for books. I really enjoyed a lot of them. And so if you've read any of them or are intrigued to read any of them after my reviews, drop me a comment below and let's chat books. If you're new to this channel, I would really like it if you subscribed. I put up a new bookish video every Saturday, apart from last week, which was a Sunday because I had absolutely horrific technical nightmares. I'm hoping that won't happen this week or again. But yeah, I normally post a bookish video every Saturday. If you're doing Dewey's Reverse Readathon this weekend, hit me up and we could maybe buddy up or at least try and encourage each other to keep going. But until next week, bye! So I'm glad this one landed through my post box.